NBC News targets the Federalist with destruction with Google's help. Former vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine gives a very interesting lesson on American slavery. And President Trump issues an executive order on policing. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. The Ben Shapiro Show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy today at expressvpn.com/Ben. We begin with the big media story of the day. So the media have just beclowned themselves. Over the past few months, they've absolutely beclowned themselves. They beclowned themselves on coronavirus because they suggested that coronavirus was super serious until exactly the moment when people decided to rush out into the streets and protest en masse, at which point coronavirus became not serious at all. They beclowned themselves on police violence by suggesting that the police all across the country are racist and systemically shooting black men, which is not true. They've beclowned themselves on everything from impeachment to Russiagate. I mean, it's an insane level of beclowning each and every day. But they've always been able to hide behind the idea that they were journalists and not activists. Well, now the mask is coming off, obviously, because in the midst of the George Floyd protest, we saw the New York Times basically cave directly to the activist wing of its own journalistic institution. We saw its woke staffers bully out the editorial op-ed page manager, who, of course, was on the left. We saw the Philadelphia Inquirer get rid of one of its editors, specifically because he was not woke enough, despite the fact that he had diversified the newsroom. So all of this was coming out, right? It was very clear that the journalistic objectivity that was purported to reign at a lot of these institutions was bullcrap. Well, the mask finally fell for, I think, what is the most clear time last night. And in the process, also unmasked a lot of the big tech companies, particularly Google, specifically Google, because I don't think all big tech companies are quite the same on this stuff. Google particularly for being unbelievably hypocritical in taking advantage of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which shields websites from being policed for their comment sections, right? Shields them from liability for their comment sections. Google decided that it would go after the Federalist, a right-wing outlet. It would go after the Federalist for its comment section. And NBC News was the leading driver here. So there's something that a lot of news organizations do these days when it comes to policing their competitors. What they will do is they will go to advertisers on a particular show, like, say, Tucker Carlson. This is the way that this works. They get some sort of notice from a group like Media Matters that Tucker has said something controversial, and Media Matters has taken him out of context to suggest that he is a racist. And then they will go to all the advertisers, and in the guise of news gathering, these outlets and these reporters will say, so, you still advertising on Tucker Carlson? Now, that's not news. That's activism, because the basic idea there is we're going to report it if you don't drop the advertising. Right? We are going to make an issue of it if you don't drop the advertising on Tucker Carlson. You are responsible for the stuff that Tucker Carlson says. So that's long been the sort of nexus between the open activism of groups like Media Matters and the so-called journalism of a lot of members of the media who are willing to run with that narrative and are willing to, quote unquote, ask questions, but ask questions to achieve a certain purpose. So yesterday, the mask came off completely came off. So NBC News has a reporter named Adele Momoko Frazier, who reported on Tuesday that Google had banned the Federalist from its advertising platform. The supposed prohibition came after NBC approached Google with allegedly problematic articles featured on the Federalist website. This is by Beckett Adams over at Washington Examiner. A spokeswoman then told the Federalist that the Federalist is not, told the Washington Examiner that the Federalist is not currently demonetized, but here is the entire story. A British nonprofit group is called the Center for Countering Digital Hate. These groups have basically been set up with incredibly shoddy research. This has been going on for several years. These are the same sorts of groups that suggest that people like Dave Rubin or Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan or I are directing people toward white supremacist ideology. Right? It's all of this nonsense that they promote that suggests that if you are a typical conservative or not even conservative, that if you stand up for the idea that men and women are different, for example, that this is driving people toward white supremacy. Doesn't matter how many times you yourself have led the charge against the alt-right, you actually are alt-right, right? These groups exist in order to promote a particular point of view of the world, which is that if you are right of Karl Marx, then you are in essence a fascist and can be grouped with the fascists. Okay, so this British nonprofit group is called the Center for Countering Digital Hate. They published a paper that targeted 10 US-based websites that it said had published racist criticisms of the recent protests surrounding the death of George Floyd. Those websites, the nonprofit group argued, stand to make millions of dollars through Google ads. Now, their study was crap. There's no evidence that the Federalist, per se, put forward any racist material on George Floyd. And the articles they cite are not actually racist. So what happens? NBC does exactly what I've talked about with regard to, for example, Tucker Carlson and Media Matters. NBC approaches Google with the Center for Countering Digital Hate study, demanding the tech giant do something about it. Now, NBC's original story quoted a Google spokesperson who said, quote, "We have strict publisher policies that govern the content ads can run on and explicitly prohibit derogatory content that promotes hatred, intolerance, violence, or discrimination based on race from monetizing." Adding, "When a page or site violates our policies, we take action. In this case, we've removed the Federalist's ability to monetize with Google." A Google spokesperson declined to reconcile that above quote with the tech company's current position that it has not, in fact, demonetized the Federalist. A spokesperson for the Federalist did not respond to the Washington Examiner's request for comment. The initial NBC report also included a passage where the author bragged that it was her news division, the ironically named Verification Unit, that approached Google with the hate study, demanding the tech company do something about the allegedly offensive online content. Google blocked the Federalist from its advertising platform after the NBC News Verification Unit brought the project to its attention, said the original report, which has now been retconned and removed. The Federalist, the NBC reporter explained in a current version of the write-up, has become well known in recent years for publishing far-right articles on a variety of subjects. It published an article claiming the media had been lying about looting and violence during the protests, which was included in the report sent to Google. So the supposedly problematic article, by the way, is not racist. It just points out that the media have basically suggested if you cover the rioting and the looting, you are racist. Google, for its part, disputed most of the NBC's report, including the part where it said the Federalist came under scrutiny because of specific articles. Instead, Google says that the Federalist comments section was the problem. A spokesperson said, "We've been told the Federalist removed comments as of this time." She added, "When our enforcement team reviews sites, they review the entire site's content, including the comment section, for policy compliance. In this instance, the notification to the Federalist was related to the comment section of the site, which is not a new policy. The comment sections consistently violated our dangerous and derogatory policy." Okay, then this reporter, remember, reporter, not activist, reporter, tweeted out new from NBC Verification Unit, "Thanks to @SF Fake News and CCD Hate for their hard work and collaboration." And so openly saying, like, I'm collaborating with these groups in order to take down the Federalist. Thanks to them. Thanks to them. Okay, so obviously, look, NBC News is not a news outlet. It is an activist outlet. Just acknowledge that that's exactly what's going on here. There are 2 points worth making. One is that it is perfectly obvious at this point that so many members of the media, not all of them, many members of the media are activists in the disguise of journalists. So I'm glad this happened because it just takes the mask right off. It is perfectly obvious, and corporations should know it, that when a journalist calls you for comment on the latest thing Tucker Carlson has said, they're not calling you because they care what you say. They're calling you because they are threatening you. And everyone knows this. Everyone knows this. Okay, this is the dirty little game. The dirty little game is all you got to do is get a reporter from Huffington Post to call you up for a comment in order to drive an advertiser off a show, off a site, or off a particular outlet. That's all you have to do. Because basically the Huffington Post journalists are the action wing of groups like Media Matters, right? Media Matters isn't openly calling for defunding Tucker Carlson. Instead, all they do is they just send off to their email list, to the NBC News Verification Unit, and to the Huffington Post quote-unquote journalists. And they say, look at this bad thing somebody said today. Why don't you call up their advertisers? Call up their advertisers, guys. And oh, look at that. It's news. Now it's news because advertisers are dropping from Tucker Carlson, right? This is the dirty little game. And now the game is out in the open because NBC News not only botched their own story, right? Their verification unit printed a story that was not true and had to revise it stealthily. But not only that, the NBC quote unquote news unit was directly driving the story in the first place by going to Google and trying to have the Federalist demonetized. So that's story number one. Your journalistic activists are in fact activists first and journalists second. Okay, and they are using their journalism as a guise for their activism. Right? It's a Trojan horse. Okay, so that's story number one, is NBC News' journalists who are actually activists demonstrating full scale that they're activists and not journalists. And I don't want to hear from them anymore, that when they are calling advertisers for comment, that what they're really doing is they're just seeking out the news. No, you're making the news. Okay, you guys are Nightcrawler. Have you ever seen that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal? He starts off by basically making money covering car crashes, and then he starts staging the car crashes so he can make money off of the car crashes, right? You guys are Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler. You're staging the crimes. You're participating in the crimes in order so you can make money off of photographing the crimes. So you get to really enjoy yourself all ways, right? You get to be an activist, and then you get to pretend that you're actually just a reporter. Okay, but there's another story here that is very telling, and it makes it very difficult for libertarians like me. Okay, so I'm libertarian when it comes to big tech. Right? I think that big tech, these are private companies. They get to basically do what they want. And so the idea that we should be regulating big tech, I've always found very dicey because I don't like the idea of Elizabeth Warren at the head of some editorial commission determining whether a website is liable or not liable for comments posted in its comment section. There's something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. This has become very controversial. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act says that you are not liable for your comments section, essentially, that you are a platform so long as you are an open thread. So that doesn't mean you can't curate the open thread, but it does mean that you have to be an open thread, right? The people who are posting the content do not work for you. So YouTube, right, is not liable for the content posted by its creators. So if I post something on YouTube that violates copyright, YouTube cannot be sued. Only I can be sued. Right? That is the basic idea of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And it makes some sense. It was not designed to suggest that you cannot curate. In fact, Section 230 was designed specifically to stop people from penalizing people who curate, because the basic case behind Section 230 was, why would you penalize a company that's taking down, for example, pornography on its site, as opposed to a company that just allows pornography on its site? Why would you penalize them? Right? Bottom line is, the distinction was between platforms which allow open thread, you can put up what you want, it can still be curated content, and sites that pay people to, or independent contractors to put up content on their site, right? Like, so Daily Wire, we actually are sort of bifurcated in this way, right? We have a comment section that we curate, but that we are not responsible for legally. If someone posts something derogatory in our comment section, we are not responsible for that. We'll work to take it down, but we are not responsible for it. And then there are our writers, right? And our writers, who are paid by us, if they say something that is legally defamatory, right, then we are liable, right? This is the law under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And Google and YouTube and all the other open thread, right, all the other platforms have relied on Section 230, because imagine for a second that you're YouTube, and all of a sudden you're made liable for every video that is placed on your site. And there are literally millions of hours placed on your site every single day, right? There's tons of content on YouTube that violates various legal provisions, like tons of it. Okay, and let's say that YouTube were made legally liable for that. Well, YouTube would not be in business for more than 37 seconds, right? They would be done, right? They'd be toast. And so they've relied on Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, saying, listen, we don't post all this content. We do our best to kind of curate it, but we don't post the content. Okay, fair enough, right? Fair enough. And I've said, okay, and if you don't like how they curate their content, well, then form a different site, right? You're perfectly welcome to do that. It's a free country. This lasts only so long as YouTube and Google actually hold themselves to the same standard. So Google owns YouTube. So according to this NBC News report, basically what happened here is that Google went to the Federalist and said, you are not curating your comments in the way that we would like you to curate your comments, and therefore we are going to talk about demonetizing you. So in other words, the standard that Google was holding the Federalist to was, you are responsible for the comment sections. We are going to demonetize you for your comment sections. We are going to remove the ability for you to make money from Google ads because your comment sections are not properly policed. So in other words, you're responsible for your comment sections. We're not responsible for our site, but you're responsible for your comment sections, right? We cannot be held legally liable for the stuff that people are posting in our comment sections, because after all, that's an open thread. But you can be held liable by us for the comments in your comment section, even though you didn't post them. It's going to make it really difficult for libertarians like me to stare down Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri when he says, okay, hold up a second. Google is going to target people for their comment sections while maintaining that they are not liable for their own comment sections. That sort of hypocrisy cannot stand. You're really going to go after people for their comment sections now? And then you expect us to treat you as completely free of legal liability because, after all, you're just a giant comment section? It don't work that way, right? If you are going to suggest that you actually get to exercise editorial control over where ads land based on comment sections, well, now you're a publisher, right? You are treating yourself as a publisher at this point, right? Because your editorial control has gone so far that you are now making actual advertising decisions based on content appearing on somebody else's comment section. So no, we're not going to grant you that freedom from liability. We'll rewrite Section 230. One of the proposals that's been made is that you should be granted the right to sue if these publishers, if these platforms rather, do not adhere to their own rules in fair and even fashion, right? So if Twitter would take down a racist white person but not take down Louis Farrakhan, for example. And again, I've stood against that because I don't think the government really has a place here. But if these institutions are going to act as the worst kind of government that I decry, it becomes very difficult for me to argue in favor of the libertarian position. So Google is just, the mask is off at Google too. They don't care about YouTube. They don't care about any semblance of freedom of speech because they're going after people's comment section. And that's a pretext, by the way. This is a pretext. I don't believe Google's story. I think what actually happened is that they saw an article. They didn't like the article. They decided to penalize the Federalist. The blowback was too harsh. So they decided to blame the comment section. And they went directly from the frying pan into the fire. Because it turns out it is worse to police a site based on its comment section than it is to police a site based on the articles that it posts. All of this is insane because we've now reached the censorious regime desired by the left. But rights are bad so long as they are exercised by people you don't like. Okay, meanwhile, speaking of media bias, so Popular Mechanics put up an article titled How to Topple a Statue Using Science. How to Topple a Statue Using Science, Popular Mechanics. They're going to teach you about using levers. It's really exciting stuff. You can safely topple a statue using science because it's very important right now. You need to know how to topple a statue. I really look forward to Popular Mechanics' next article, How to Build a Molotov Cocktail. Very important stuff. But don't worry, guys. It's not activism. It's just journalism. It's just journalism, how to topple a statue. Now, all of this is to back a narrative, right? All of this is to back a particular narrative. America is deeply systemically evil. All of its institutions are shot through with evil, and those who do not buy into the narrative must be punished. Must be punished. The best example of this is a truly horrific article from the New York Times. This insane article from the New York Times focuses on high school students and alum. It's called High School Students and Alumni Are Using Social Media to Expose Racism. Learning has been online and remote this semester. So too now are call-outs of questionable behavior. Questionable behavior. Okay, so we're going to call out high school students now. Very, very important. Okay, so let me give my perspective on high school students generally. High school students are idiots. I was one once. Okay, high school students are dumb. Meaning that my first rule, I get asked for advice from high school students on a routine basis. And they say, do you have a piece of advice for us? It's like, stay away from social media because everything you do on social media lives forever. I started writing a syndicated column at age 17. Most of my worst columns were written from ages 18 to 21. Right? When you are young, you are full of vinegar and pep and stupidity. And you are more likely to post something that you are going to regret later. Right? I have a whole list of things online about the things I regret having said over the years. Well, if you're posting stuff on social media when you're 15, 16 years old, chances are very good you're going to post something incredibly idiotic and or offensive. Now, the way normally you would deal with that in a typical scenario, let's say there were no social media. Somebody would say something offensive in class, right? Or something would say something offensive to a friend. And then the friend would go to the friend and say, you know, that really hurt my feelings. You really shouldn't say stuff like that. That was offensive. Maybe you didn't mean to offend me. I don't know. But you really shouldn't say stuff like that. And that would give the person a chance for repentance and for making themselves better, right? That would be the idea. And I'm not speaking, out of school here. When I was in high school, as I've talked about before, I was viciously bullied. And I don't just mean people calling me names. I mean actual hardcore physical abuse. I mean people hitting me with belts and such. I mean like really not great stuff when I was in high school. Now, I know the names of all the people who did that. I still remember all their names. I remember all their faces. Many of them are still people in my social circles. I remember all of them. I've never said the names, nor will I say the names, because these kids were idiots. They were 16, 17 years old. They were morons. And we handled all of this internally, right? We had discussions with the principal. I didn't feel like justice was done. But what I did figure, and what I still figure, is that people have to move beyond what they were at 15 or 16 years old, and you have to give them the opportunity to move beyond what they were when they were 15 or 16 years old. This is particularly true when you're talking about, mine was an extreme case with physical abuse. When you're talking about what people say, it seems to me that this is triply or quadruply true. You say something dumb when you're 15 or 16 years old, you shouldn't be held accountable at 30 or 35 for it, nor should you be publicly shamed when you are 15 or 16 for it. Somebody should come to you behind the scenes, a mentor, an elder figure, somebody from the community, and say, you really shouldn't have said that. That was really bad. You should apologize to the person you hurt, and then you should move on with your life and act better. Because guess what? Being young is a time when you are supposed to make yourself better. Right? People don't change very much beyond the age of 30, maybe. But when you're 15 or 16, there's a lot of change going on. Now the New York Times is writing full-scale articles on why it is good to social media shame high school students who post dumb and or racist crap online. And I'm just wondering, isn't it possible to help them course correct their behavior without this sort of stuff? And by the way, this goes for black, white, and green. If you're a 15-year-old kid living in the inner city and you post something really awful online, I don't think that should ruin your life. And I don't think you should be, quote unquote, publicly shamed for that. It's one thing to commit a crime, white, black, or green. It is another thing to say something offensive, white, black, or green. Because people say dumb stuff when they're 14 or 15 years old. Now, the New York Times is really promoting this idea that what's good is this public shaming ritual. And it's got to extend all the way down to childhood. So the New York Times has a very, very long article by Taylor Lorenz and Catherine Rosman. Again, this is activism masquerading as journalism because it's actually pushing the agenda. Called High School Students and Alumni Are Using Social Media to Expose Racism. Over the past few weeks, as the Black Lives Matter movement has grown following outrage over the killing of George Floyd, high school students have leveraged every social media platform to call out their peers for racist behavior. Very important stuff. You're making the world a better place by taking little Jessica, who said a very bad thing online, and then exposing her to the minions of hatred in the boo box over at Twitter. Very, very important. You couldn't just go on to Jessica and say, that was offensive. You might want to take that down. You couldn't have been a decent human being, right? Instead, you decided the public we have to Justine Sacco this person. We have to publicly shame this 16-year-old. Students have repurposed large meme accounts, set up Google Docs and anonymous pages on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter, and wielded their personal followings to hold friends and classmates accountable for behavior they deem unacceptable. But they're not holding them accountable. All they're doing is ruining their lives. Right? Accountability would be you go to somebody and you correct the behavior. That's holding them accountable. People will post videos of people saying the N-word or videos where they're being racist or using derogatory words and stuff like that, and they go viral, said Sophia Giannotta, 16, a sophomore at Whitesboro High School in Whitesboro, New York, where a teacher was recently criticized for stating that all lives matter in a virtual school event. He later apologized. Question: how is all lives matter like a great example of such vicious racism that you require public ostracization and public apology? On June 2nd, an anonymous Instagram account dedicated to exposing racism at San Marcos High School in San Marcos, California, appeared online. Osias Naphtali Garcia, 19, a senior, noticed it almost immediately. The account was shared across group chats and Instagram stories. Within a few hours, had amassed about 900 new followers. The account began sharing screenshots and videos of students at school using racial slurs, engaging in cultural appropriation, participating in the George Floyd challenge. I mean, all this is ugly stuff, and making insensitive remarks. The names and handles for each student were included in the posts. Within 48 hours, the account had grown to nearly 3,000 followers. And this is the key, right? It's all about the virtue signaling of the followers. It's not about correcting the sins of the people who are sinning. It's about all these people following so they can hit the click, the like, the retweet, and then they can spread out the shame. I've participated in the correction of this person's... No, you've participated in the destruction of this person who could have been course corrected. Because I assume when you're 16 or 15, you can be course corrected. And I think it's a fairly safe assumption. It's one of the key assumptions of American criminal law for juveniles, by the way. So again, the New York Times promoting this idea that this is very good. These call-out pages, they're very good. These pages are popping up left and right, said Ethan Ramirez, 18, a graduate of Bowie High School in Austin, Texas. There's ones that are region-specific, high school-specific, district-specific. Several large meme accounts have also now devoted themselves to exposing racist behavior. Students are invited to submit screenshots of problematic behavior, which are in turn shared to an audience of sometimes thousands online. They'll allow people to submit anonymous info or images or videos. They'll cross out the sender's name, but leave the racist person's contact info basically for everyone to call them out. The result is a social media pile-on, harassment, doxing, cancellation. Brenna Berry, 16, a student at a Catholic day school in Jacksonville, Florida, learned this firsthand. After posting some advocacy on Instagram and TikTok for the Blue Lives Matter movement, Miss Berry, whose father is a police officer, was met with vicious harassment. Her post spread across her peers' Instagram feeds, and, quote, my own friends were commenting that I was a racist and they can't support me. Things travel fast. I'm nervous about my address getting leaked. Question, is this making things better? Is this really making things better? It turns out that most of the political change that happens in the United States is based on friends talking to friends and people talking to each other like friends. How often have you been converted by people browbeating you? The answer is virtually never. People are not politically converted, and they're not converted from sin by people browbeating them. Right? Fire and brimstone type stuff tends to get people motivated, but it doesn't actually convince people on the other side or people who have sinned that you are a welcoming presence hoping to help them. Instead, what it does is alienate them. It makes them feel that you're a bad person. This entire culture is designed to make a certain cadre of people feel very good about themselves for doing something very bad. The call-out culture is a horrible thing for the country. It is a bad thing for the country. Calling people out privately and telling them that you don't like that behavior, and as a friend you think it's a bad idea, that's a good thing. Calling people out publicly in front of 1,000 strangers, particularly kids, in order to quote-unquote shame them, is an absurdity. It's a moral absurdity. You're not doing anything good. You're not. All you are doing is creating a totalitarian culture in which people are afraid to speak, and then, by the way, still say the bad things behind closed doors because they've not been converted from their original views. Instead, they've just been browbeaten into silence. So you didn't correct the problem. All you did was push it underground, and that's really what's going to happen here. And it's ugly. It's bad. And speaking of the call-out culture and the stupidity of call-out culture, Mike Gundy, right, who is the Oklahoma football coach, he was called out. Why? Because that guy, he wore a T-shirt with OANN on it, One America News Network. He had that T-shirt and he wore it, and he said he sometimes watches it. That's very bad. So now he's been forced to apologize. First rule of mob cancellation, don't apologize. Don't apologize. Right? Apologize for the stuff that you have done that's actually wrong. Don't apologize for liking a particular network. Don't apologize for any of this stuff. Because guess what? The apology is not going to be enough. Right? Gundy's going to find himself on the chopping block partially because he apologized. The dirty little secret of cancel culture is you don't have to be canceled. You don't have to be canceled. You can only cancel you. In a free country, only you can cancel you. Here's Mike Gundy apologizing yesterday because he's afraid of losing his job, and then probably the apology will prompt him to lose his job anyway. Here's Mike Gundy from OSU yesterday.
Once I learned how that network felt about Black Lives Matter, I was disgusted and knew it was completely unacceptable to me. I want to apologize to all members of our team former players and their families for the pain and discomfort that has been caused over the last 2 days. Black lives matter to me. Our players matter to me.
Okay, but blink a few times if it's an SOS. I mean, these are hostage videos essentially, right? You can believe Black Lives Matter and also watch the news coverage on OANN. In fact, you can watch all sorts of kooky stuff. It's a free country. You can do whatever you want. But this idea that this means that you are racist because you watch stuff that was not approved by the popular. And listen, I'm not a huge fan of some of the programming on OANN. There's some people over there I'm friends with. There's some people I definitely am not. But the idea that you wore a t-shirt and now you are canceled is absurd. And again, the only way to escape the censure is to repeat the mantras. I talked about this yesterday. This is unity through totalitarianism, through cultural totalitarianism. Repeat and believe. Repeat the mantras and you will be protected. And so you end up with Roger Goodell suggesting that he wants Colin Kaepernick, a man who suggested that the killing of the lead terrorist in the Iranian regime was just the murder of more black and brown bodies by America, right? Colin Kaepernick, a guy who wore socks with cops' pigs on them while he was practicing back in 2015. That guy is going to be the social guide of the NFL, according to Roger Goodell. Again, Roger, blink if you need us to deploy a team. These hostage videos are just beyond.
If he wants to resume his career in the NFL, that obviously is going to take a team to make that decision. But I welcome that, support the club making that decision and encourage them to do that. If his efforts are not on the field, and continuing to work in this space, we welcome to that table and to be able to help us and guide us and help us make better decisions about the kinds of things that need to be done in communities.
Okay, and great. I definitely need Colin Kaepernick, who's worn a Che Guevara t-shirt, by the way, to talk about, like, OANN t-shirt, very bad, apologize. Che Guevara t-shirt, actual communist mass murderer, totally fine. Totally fine. Good stuff happening in our culture right now. And what exactly is the narrative that you're supposed to buy into? You're supposed to buy into the narrative that America is uniquely evil. Okay, we're going to get to Tim Kaine and the narrative you're supposed to repeat, all the slogans you are supposed to repeat, and how we're making the world a better place by changing Snap, Crackle, and Pop on the Rice Krispies packaging. Very, very important stuff. Solving racism, one branding matter at a time. We'll get to that momentarily. First, this year, it's been like 8 years this year. It's been a crazy year. Like every day, I thought that the news cycle had magnified tremendously since Trump took office. And then this year happened, and it turns out that we are just living on a hamster wheel of news. Well, if you can't get enough of the actual news, not the crap you get from NBC News, the activist journalists of the left, but if you want, right-wing opinion journalism, and you want the straight facts told to you from a conservative point of view, go check out dailywire.com right now and get a reader's pass. You get access to exclusive op-eds from us, your podcast hosts, as well as guest writers, and in-depth analysis from our Daily Wire reporters on top of our regular breaking news. I have a brand new article out today on the totalitarian subculture that has taken over the mainstream culture. Our membership tier, this reader's pass, it's already a bargain at $3 a month. But if you join today, you get your first month for 99 cents. You also get access to our mobile app. You receive push notifications for breaking news and special content. And you can join the community of Daily Wire members who are actively commenting and discussing our content with each other. That is mobile ad-free access to all of the Daily Wire news, exclusive op-eds, all of our podcasts on the mobile app, all for the low price of $1. Best of all, your dollars are getting you the news you need without the leftist spin. So head on over to dailywire.com/subscribe and join today. Also, when you're a subscriber, you get to ask questions during our backstage lives. We have a backstage. So yesterday I had an all access, which, let's be frank, it's amazing. People love it. I sing random songs in random voices. Chris Matthews did make an appearance to sing music of the night, actual things that happen on All Access Live. Backstage is a little different. We actually talk about issues. It's me and Jeremy Boring, and Michael Knowles and Andrew Clavin, maybe a couple special guests. We're having one tomorrow, Thursday, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. We have a backstage, so make sure that you subscribe now so you can get access to all of these magnificent glories. Also, please go pick up a copy of my new book, pre-order a copy of my new book, How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps. Comes out July 21st. Never have I written a book that is more relevant. I mean, this book is like right on the money relevant. I wrote it back in December, January, before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit. I thought, this book is probably going to be kind of back shelved because, after all, we can't really argue over a pandemic, can we? Wrong I was. It turns out that all of the seething issues underneath American politics, the destruction of America's core philosophy, the destruction of her history, the destruction of her culture of rights, all of that is first and forefront in the minds of most Americans these days. My book is not just an expose of that. It is a rebuttal to all of these very, very bad ideas that you are seeing promulgated in the public sphere. It's called How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps. I think it's a useful book. It is not just a vitally a vitally relevant book. It is a useful book as well. How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps. Go pre-order it right now at dailywire.com/Ben. That's dailywire.com/Ben. You can pick it up at Amazon as well or at any other bookseller. It's coming out July 21st. So order it now to make sure you get your copy. You're listening to the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast and radio show in the nation.